Good morning, everyone. I see the room is starting to fill in, which is great. I'm Daniel Bring. I'm the executive editor of American Affairs, one of the co-hosts of the Energy Imperative Summit. We're very excited to present the next session. It'll be a longer session, but we think a terrific conversation between two of the rising stars in energy and permitting policy, and one of the all-time titans in the field. Without further ado, I'd like to present The Peril and Promise of Permitting Reform, featuring Thomas Hochman, Director of Energy and Infrastructure Policy at the Foundation for American Innovation, Pavan Venkatakrishnan, Policy Advisor at the Foundation for American Innovation, and the man, the myth, Senator Joe Manchin.
We filled in a bit. This morning, I think people were having a hard time braving the rain and the early wake up. But I know there are lots of people who are thrilled to hear you speak. So thanks for being here.
Good to be here. You said two great speakers with you, and Scott and Alan, and they're good people. They know what to do, and they're going to get it done, I believe.
Totally. So you recently left a big job, as some people in the audience might have heard. You've been traveling the country, retailing a number of the lessons you learned during your time in office. So first, how's retirement from public life treating you from public office? And next up, would you recommend your old job to a friend or not?
I'd recommend public service to anybody who has service in their heart. If you want to do something to help people, if you want to move society forward, if you want to keep this great country in the shape that we received it from our parents and grandparents, because right now we're the first generation that's going to leave it in worse shape than we received it. So if you want to do all those changes, yes, get involved, because I can tell you, as John Kennedy said, public service is the noblest of all professions. But some people now are getting involved because of fame and fortune. It's not because of, I put my country before my party, whether you're Democrat or Republican. You should be an American first. Being a Democrat or Republican tells you might have a different idea how to fix a problem. Mm-hmm. And right now they can't even agree on what the problem is. So they're all against each other, and they got guilt. It's a horrible situation. So for that reason there, you have to have a resolution as far as a commitment that you're not going to get caught into that. And you have to be able to stand off, because I told them I was a spear catcher. I was a spear catcher because I was willing to work with anybody and everybody that wanted to do something that would be helpful and make changes. And politics is this way. The representative form of government works this way. I go and I see a basketball game. I like to see a big, long three-pointer win the game, but I'll take some foul shots and win the game. I go to a football game. I want to see a Hail Mary win the game. It's exciting, but I'll take some first downs. You got to take what you can. If you can move the ball from here to here in this form of government that we have to compromise, you're not going to get it all. If you're going to be against something because it's not perfect, you can always let perfect be the enemy of the good. And politicians will give you, well, it just wasn't good enough. Okay, then ask the question, was it better than what we had? Take what you can get when you can get it. And that's the problem we're running into. And they're using that as a crux right now and coming back and says, well, it just didn't do exactly what we wanted. No, it's not going to. A more perfect union, this doesn't mean we have it perfect. We don't have it perfect. We're trying to make it better. Take what you got and go.
So you're teeing us up well here. We've been talking a lot about permitting reform today, yesterday, and in general. During your time in the Senate, you worked on a number of permitting reform efforts. You had the Energy Independence and Security Act, the Building American Energy Security Act, and maybe best known to this audience, the Energy Permitting Reform Act of 2024. Some of those bills wider in scope than others, but all of them tried to address some of the biggest barriers to building things in this country: frivolous litigation, long timelines, and so on. The bill that is on the table today, the negotiations that are going on today, likely to pull from or at least be inspired by a lot of the work that you did. To what extent do you feel like the conditions and the urgency for permitting reform today is similar to what it was, a couple of years ago, and to what extent has it changed?
We have so many challenges, but the bottom line is if you couldn't, I kept thinking if we had the restrictions that we have today and loopholes to jump through, and this was 1940, 1941, and World War II pressing down on us, would we have been able to build the arsenal to defend the world, to beat fascism. Could we have done it? No. Couldn't do it today because of the restrictions. And we've got to get towards a balance. And the balance is this. It says, on permitting, I said, all the things we want to do, we can't do. And what's the most impediment that we have? Only thing that I knew in my life was the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Atlantic Coast Pipeline spent $3, $4, $5 billion before they went defunct. They just quit. Okay? Mountain Valley Pipeline went from a cost of approximately $3.3 billion estimated cost up to about $7 to $8 billion to get it completed, and it took the act of Congress and the president supporting me to get that done. That, to me, I said, well, we didn't have judicial reform. We were going through, the Fourth Circuit, and the same three people sat on that circuit would not rotate off the way they were supposed to in judicial system, and they just kept killing it every time. And then the people that are on making a living doing this, and there's people that are really sincere about climate. We're all sincere. You should be. But basically, technology is going to fix the climate. It's not going to be elimination. You have to innovate and more technology. You can clean up the environment. You can do things. You can find new ways. I would say to all of you, in the younger, you two, that probably fusion is going to be the energy of the future to some extent, as far as how we power the world. And it'll be available technology to anybody in the world. So that'll be an equalizer, I think. In the next 20, 30 years, I've been to Provence, France. I've seen the ITER operation. It's unbelievable what they're trying to do, capturing the energy of the sun. And when you're able to do that, and it becomes commercialized, then you're going to have something. So you got SMRs, you got micros, and all the things that should be done. But without permitting reform, nothing's going to happen, because we're going to sit here and spin our wheels. And the bill that John Barrasso and I did, worked on it for over a year on that, but I've been working for the last 5 years on different types of pieces of legislation you've mentioned. That bill, we said, what can we get done, John? And John and I are friends. I was the chairman. He's the ranking member. We made our staffs work together. We give everybody a specific opportunity and a job to do. We figured out what we couldn't get accomplished because we couldn't agree. We did that first and eliminated it, and we got what we could. Even though we had some disagreement, we thought we could find ways to move forward. Transmission was one. And the staff, my staff and John's staff, worked on it. We met their conditions, and what they were wanting is that, well, you had to have state rights. Well, I'm a former governor. That's a big thing. 10th Amendment's a big thing, states' rights. But if there is energy we're going to produce at a certain part in our country, and we've got to cross 3 states to get it to an end user. So FERC makes a decision. Is there a customer for that meets the need for that new technology? And we said, yes, there is. We can produce it here, and we can deliver it here. How do you get through the states without violating state rights? We came down to the conclusion, we'll give them 1 year. In 1 year, because basically every utility company, the biggest cash cow is transmission. Whether it be pipelines or whether it be transmission lines, that's where all the money is. And they want that. And it's a monopoly. So I said, I get it, guys. So what we're going to do is give you one chance. Every one of you's worked with your Public Service Commission. You've got one chance to sit down and within 1 year work out, do you want to bring that in your portfolio, or it's something you don't care about? And that's a pretty good, in a CEO's position, to say, I got a 1 year look to see if I can bring that in, if it's going to be beneficial to my portfolio and to my company. So we came to that agreement. We came to a lot of agreements. And we passed the bill 15-4. Never been done that we passed the bill out of our committee with that overwhelming majority.
Totally. So the Trump administration, as you probably well know, has weaponized a number of statutes, even previously routine ones, to block and otherwise impede the build out of renewable projects. But as you remember well, the Biden administration embraced many of those tactics themselves, right? The LNG pause, slow walking of court orders for leasing, and even the deadlines you promulgated in the IRA for oil and gas leasing offshore. All of this has spurred efforts to, get at this problem through Congress, get some guidelines and guardrails in there. I was doing some digging. You are the first, I think, member to introduce a bill on this topic. 2013, President Obama pulled a Clean Water Act permit for the Spruce No. 1 coal mine. You and David Vitter introduced legislation to prevent a president from pulling those permits, Clean Water Act dredge and fills. So how are you thinking about this issue now, and what are some of the lessons you draw from your experience watching?
Well, through all those experiences, sometimes, and I understand as an executive, I was a governor, and I understand you think, well, you can do this, this, and that. And you have to understand the process. But I was a legislator before that. So I was a House of Delegate member. I was a state senator, Secretary of State, and then become governor. And I knew that there's a certain decorum that we go through. You work with them. And once you bring it, if you can't get enough of your legislators, your congresspeople, or your senators to agree that there's a better way that we can do things and we can fix things, and you got a problem. What happened on that one, he had basically targeted fossil energy, Obama administration. And he and I went toe to toe on that. And I says, Mr. President, you cannot eliminate what you don't like. I said, you come from a coal area, Mr. President, Illinois. We worked together on coal projects. We knew the technology. We had scrubbers, low NOx boilers, baghouses. We did everything. But carbon capture sequestration was the big bugaboo. And when he made a statement, go ahead and build a coal-fired plant, I'll break you. He basically said this. He knew, because our state was the one that took a Mountaineer plant, 900 megawatt coal-fired plant. And we were able to show that we could commercialize taking clear-stream carbon off and basically liquefying it and pressurizing it in the ground. But the economics weren't there. 900 megawatts, it took us 300 megawatts to do that. Well, you can't go and you can't amortize a debt of 900 megawatts of a power plant of billions of dollars and then only have 600 megawatts of revenue because 300 is meeting your environmental requirements. That makes no sense at all. But then the government never, you know how much every administration has talked about sequestration? No one's done it. They don't want to find a president. They don't want it because when they do, that means you have a longer life to these projects. So right now, the administration, the Trump administration, thinks that coal is going to be revitalized. No one's going to build a new coal-fired plant because it doesn't have a long life. There's other cheaper ways to heat water and make steam to run turbines. And they're going to be going in that direction. You're not going to go back. And natural gas is a tremendous transition fuel. Nuclear's coming. Everyone's waiting for that. But guys, the big thing was this. You want to know how the IRA came about? After I was the one vote that would not vote for the BBB, the Build Back Better bill of the Biden administration, because it was so expensive and so far-reaching. It would have changed the social support systems in our country would have gotten so dominant to where it would have been overwhelming. There'd have been a $10 trillion bill if it was a dollar. I just couldn't get there after 8 months. So when I said I can't get there and they dropped the bill, everyone got very upset. 3 months went by and the Ukraine war started. The Ukraine war started over one thing, energy. You have Putin basically weaponized energy. Our allies were hurting. We're supposed to be there to help them, and we weren't able to do it because we weren't producing what we should. Because they shut down all the permits. You couldn't get a permit for nothing. You couldn't get a lease. You couldn't get anything on BLM lands or offshore. So I told Schumer, you got an energy problem. He said, well, you're chairman. You ought to write something. I says, Chuck, I just went through 8 months of hell. I'm not going to go back and jump in the fire again on this because if it doesn't come out right. So I didn't say a word to anybody. I don't think no one knew that we were writing a bill. And I took my committee and I said, we're going to do something here. We're going to see if we can put a piece of legislation that gives us superiority in producing energy this country needs today and be able to invest in energy we want for tomorrow. That's all. And we took proven technology. We didn't take pie in the sky, any hypothesis. We just says, give us things that have already been proven under commercial load that works. So we looked at, of course, you have wind and solar, and then we looked at geothermal, and then we looked at nukes, and then we looked at hydrogen, and we did everything that we could that we knew we could mature further with more technology and bring it in line to be competitive. So that's what we did. We did it because of that, and also we had to do one more thing because I knew where they would come at us. They would say, sure, I'll agree to all that, and they would go back and not give any permits in any of this at all on BLM and that. Since our committee had jurisdiction over BLM and all the offshore waters, I said this, then there will not be any wind or solar built anywhere in BLM land in the country or offshore unless we're extracting the resources we have under it. That's the oil and gas. And that's how we did it and tied it together. And they couldn't separate those. Because you separate one, you kill the whole thing. But then they just advanced the EVs and just threw caution to the wind. And that caused, I think, a lot of problems.
So it seems like
That'll happen.
it seems like every single time we go through a major permitting reform negotiation, the partisan politics of individual statutes, individual processes have changed somewhat from the time before, right? So I think it's fair to say there are an increasing number of Democrats who are comfortable with the idea of NEPA reform. Certainly, the politics of transmission are always changing. And so I'm wondering, from your vantage point, how have Democratic and Republican positions changed on these issues?
Here's what I would have said before, and I knew about the NEPA concerns that we have. I know 401 water permits. I knew all the obstacles that we run into. But I thought if we could get a major overhaul of the judicial process of how you're able to bring suits, when you're able to intervene, what time, what shot clocks are going to be basically if it goes in back to the committees and starts over again. We think we cured about all of that in that bill that John and I did. So with that being said, I said, if we can just get this done, then it'll highlight what NEPA is still, the perils that we have with NEPA. And then look at reasonable people sitting down, okay, we want to protect the water. I said, I don't want to drink dirty water. I don't want anyone to have not clean, potable water, okay? And if we can do that and clean it up and have the technology to do it and not pollute and make it even worse, then we should. And I've always said this, if there's technology that you can use in the energy sector, and the technology has been proven and it works, and you don't use it because you don't think it gives you the profit returns you want, then I'm sorry. I'm going to give you a shot clock and tell you within 90 days or a year or whatever is reasonable to implement that. That's the time element you have. If not, you're in violation, we'll shut you down. And I think that's reasonable, gives everyone a chance to play on a level playing field. Technology's there. This is what we have. It works. You have this much time to implement. Perfect example is methane gas. We've vetted for years, right? And then we had technology that could take off methane gas coming out of the wellhead once that got there. But what happened is the small producers, the wells don't produce enough to offset the cost of that. So you have to take everything into consideration and make determinations of how you're going to go forward.
So from your experience, you think litigation reform is the core of any permitting reform effort? It's got to get at the litigation.
We've already passed it. Pavan, we already passed it out of the Energy Committee in a 15-4 vote. If we've passed that out of our committee with a 15-4 vote, that should be something that Democrats had agreed on, Republicans agreed on. Take it. And I'll never forget some of my friends in the House, that were having some challenges. They needed more. I said, I agree with you. You need more. The whole system needs more. I've given you all I can get right now. I've tried it for many years. Can't you just take this? And here's the mindset. Well, let me tell you, as a Republican, we just won. The president's coming back as Trump. And then we won the House and the Senate. We got the trifecta. You got the trifecta, but you still have a government. And you still have a branch of that government called the Senate that still operates like no other body in the world, where the minority has the right to participate. And you need their vote. That's called the filibuster. Well, the whole thing about the filibuster is we're the only country in the world that allows the minority to participate. So as a senator, I got to be honest with you, I wasn't all that upset with them in the minority and majority. The only people who really cared about that was the majority leader. They got a bigger office and they got a bigger war chest. That's about it. Other than that, we had committees. Okay, you got chairmanships if you're hell-bent on having a chairmanship, and I was a ranking member on energy before I became the chairman, and I worked very closely with both sides, so it didn't bother me. But that's the problem that we have, and the bottom line is, take it. I said, guys, you still have to get through the Senate. You're not going to get 60 if you start to throw the whole enchilada at it. And I would tell my friends that were here, Scott and Alan both, guys, take it as far as you can. When you have an agreement, shake hands, make that, get a priority, so it has a priority status on the floor, and that way it'll come right to the floor and it'll get voted on quickly.
Do you think this year's the year?
Well, I think we have a good roadmap.
Okay.
We've done an awful lot of work, so they have to decide, and I think they talked about it on the previous. Okay. It's just a matter of how close they are. Is there some other things that they've been able to work with Democrats and progressives and say, okay, this is what NEPA, no matter what we do, NEPA is preventing this, and you're able to use that as a tactic to basically hold these multi-billion-dollar projects up. If you don't like the project, see, the shot clock we put in judicial reform, you had to do it within 6 months. You couldn't wait 2 years after I spent $2 billion and then come in and enter into a lawsuit against me. We stopped all that stuff. And so I think the roadmap is there. Take it and run with it. See what you can get done. Hopefully.
So I think even the most ardent critics of the Inflation Reduction Act, I think would concede that there's it feels like there was an energy politics and a world of energy policy prior to the passage of that bill, and a different one that came after it. It certainly feels like we've sort of been talking about energy policy within the context of a post-IRA world ever since it passed. It absolutely became a lightning rod last year during the Republican reconciliation package. So, you look back at the last 4 years of the development of energy policy, maybe politics more broadly, since that law passed. Would you do anything different?
Oh, absolutely. The biggest mistake I made when we wrote the bill, me and my staff, the energy portion of that whole bill, the IRA, I named it the Inflation Reduction Act. That was my biggest mistake. Got caught up in the moment, okay? Inflation was at 9% at the time the bill came, okay? Inflation was at 9%, gas was at $5, and Joe Biden's approval rating was in the 20s. So everything was in chaos. And I knew inflation would be reduced if we did the bill, because we're going to produce more energy than ever before. You put more product in the market, supply and demand, just automatically, it does what it does. The markets react. And I don't know why. I should have just said, this is the Energy Security Act of 2022. That's what it is. That's exactly what it did. And from the minute we passed the bill, the day they passed the bill, they start talking, the President, Biden, and his staff, the greatest environmental bill. They never said anything about the greatest energy bill that we're passing, because we produced more energy in 2023 than if anybody in the world's ever produced. And the Democrats couldn't even speak about it. And I kept saying, we're producing more than ever. We were at 4.7 billion barrels of oil. We were at 38 trillion cubic feet of gas. I mean, we did everything. That bill just was gushed. It made things happen. And so Joe Biden didn't talk about it. Kamala Harris didn't talk about it. 1 month before the election, then they tried to say, well, we're producing energy. Yeah, you're doing it reluctantly. You didn't want to do it. You were forced to do it because we needed the energy, and we started LNG. We had no LNG in 2016. Well, look where we are today in LNG, what we're doing, what we're supplying the rest of the world. And now if we can just supply America and we would work the shipping thing out, then we'd be a lot better off.
Totally.
We were joking backstage that the Energy Security Act, or the ESA, would really throw off the environmentalists who were coming after the bill.
You can imagine. I had the whole energy community pretty much all over the world after me. And then I had President Macron from France, and then Chairman Schulz from Germany. And they came to me one day, and I was in Paris, I think, for climate, and I was making a presentation. And like a Scud missile, they came to me. And they were like a bandy rooster. They were just going at me. And they said, you're going to kill our country. You're taking all of our investments. And I said, well, wait a minute. First of all, I can tell you one thing. Our dear friends and our allies in France and in Germany, not one word was ever saying, well, we'll do this and it'll harm our allies. We never thought about that. We were wondering how we could produce and do what we need in our country, and also find the answers to the problems we had with energy through technology. And I said, here's the difference between your country and what we're trying to do in America. I said, I've been beat up for like 12, 15 years on, Manchin, you got to get on board with the cap and trade. You got to have a carbon tax. And I said, let me just tell why I'm against that. Because all of you all do not want to commit yourself to using every penny of resource that you would collect from a carbon tax to fix the problem through technology, and basically allow the industry to use that money to invest and to get better technology to reduce carbon output. You used it for absolutely all your social reforms in your countries, and not a darn thing that you put in basically incentivizing the industry to find better ways to produce energy. That's the difference. You used it. You used a stick on people. We've used a carrot. I didn't do it that way. And I said, we're giving them incentives now because that's exactly what did it. And that's why we had so much investment.
Yep. I want to take us in a slightly different direction. You recently testified in front of the House on critical minerals. And one of your core messages was that permitting is important for minerals, but it's not enough. What else do you think we need to be doing?
Well, permitting is important because once you get that, you're going to have to process it. You're going to have to, refineries, you got to do all of this. We have to look at the whole thing where we are. How come with all the energy that we produce, all the oil we produce, we have most of it like crude in the United States, okay? So these plants that we have, I'm told, so if I'm wrong, you all probably are out there have more information than I do on this, but a lot of this was done back in the 70s. I lived through the 74 embargo. I had to wait in line for gasoline to go to work back then. So I remember all those days. And I don't know how many out here, I see a few smiles, but those of us who lived through those days, remember it wasn't pleasant. And then I understand, then we start basically, our refineries were set up with a blend of sweet and heavy crude. And we haven't been able to build any new refineries. So we're still working off of that same blend ratio. And that's why I was, and the Canadian, that was a tremendous input for us. And not building the line, I think was a big mistake on the United States of America because it was still coming, but it was coming the most dangerous and expensive way through rails and through over highways. And then in Venezuela, it was cheap. And you saw what happened. So here we are in our refineries that we're really still relying on imports in order to make our refineries work the way they should. Those things could change. It's just a crazy situation that we're in.
Yeah. So you think about minerals kind of the way you would.
Well, critical minerals right now, there's 4 building blocks. Only thing I've said about tariffs and everything else. When I first got to the Senate, the first thing I learned in armed services was that we have 4 countries of concern we can never depend on: China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. Those countries are never going to have our back. Anything that you're depending on coming from those 4 countries are never going to be relied upon to the point to where you should depend on it. Well, look what we did. Our enriched uranium comes from Russia.
Yep.
Okay? Look at all of our other stock feeds. Critical minerals are all captured by China. We got ourselves in a hell of a conundrum, and we let it happen. Just turned a blind eye to it because the capitalists we are, and we let the market go where the market would go. And it went to where basically the products were. It was cheaper to produce it and better profit returns, period. Not thinking about strategically what we should be doing to make sure we defend our country. So the building blocks that you have, and critical minerals is a building block right now. You should do everything you can to protect that and make sure you're able to produce within your own country or countries that you have free trade agreement with, long-standing relationships with. Well, the first thing this administration has done is basically severed a lot of our relationships, especially with Canada. Canada has a cadre of resources, okay? Australia is a tremendous supplier of ours and can be even bigger and better. So we need to do that. And the tariffs should be used to protect countries encroaching on that, such as China, whether it be vehicles, whether it be steel, whether it be critical minerals, whatever it would be, until we can compete. And if other countries are basically communist countries such as China's backing, they can undercut no matter when they want to. If they want to come into market, they can take a market over tomorrow, no matter how progressive, how efficient you might be, and with all the technology in the world, they can still undercut you because they can take the loss because the government picks up the difference. And that's what you have to protect against. That's the proper purpose of tariffs, not just to beat people over the head with and think, well, you're not my friend anymore, so I'm going to charge you 50% today.
So you've talked about trade instruments here. We were talking about incentives and financing with the Inflation Reduction Act before. At the same time, you were talking about how you looked at BBB and you said, look, this is too much. And so I think a lot of folks are thinking about what is the right role for industrial policy right now.
Let me just tell you this: as far as on the finances, I don't know how we as a society are not talking about the finances of our country. I don't know how anybody, whether your age, your generation, my generation, no one's asking questions to the people that want to serve in government. No one's asking a presidential, what are you going to do about the debt? Give you an example. When Ross Perot got into it and thought, this is horrible, we were $2-3 trillion of debt, the GDP. And he thought that was a horrible situation. We can do better than that. And you remember, he made a heck of a run, made a lot of noise about that. Then in 1997, you had John Kasich, Republican from Ohio, Ways and Means Chairman, with Erskine Bowles, with President Clinton. They put a tax policy together that started immediately putting balanced budgets and surpluses. We'd have been debt-free as a nation in 2006 if we'd have proceeded. What happened? 9/11. We declared 2 wars, never paid for it. We had 2 Bush tax cuts that basically put us in a trajectory that was like this, went like this to 10 trillion, and never looked back. And both sides are blamed. Both sides are blamed. Democrats, Republicans have both added on debt. When I got to the Senate, it was $13 trillion of debt. My first meeting, Armed Services, we had all the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They're sitting up in their stage, and we're sitting there and asking questions. And I thought, well, I just got into the Senate. I've heard about all the concerns we have, geopolitical unrest around the world. Let me ask the expert. So we asked the question. And Admiral Mike Mullen was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. What's the greatest threat the United States of America faces? He never hesitated. He never blinked an eye. And he said, without even thinking, I'm thinking it's going to be Russia, China, maybe a combination, boom, boom, boom. He said, listen, all of us in this room today, there's never going to be another military might that will overtake us. There's never going to be in our lifetime another military might of another country that will overtake us militarily. But they won't have to. We'll take ourselves down first. The weight of the debt and the interest on the debt and the pushback from the people, because the pressure will be put on your citizens with the debt that you're carrying, will put the pressure to bring us down. And it's brought down every dynasty, every regime. It brought down the Roman Empire. It's brought down everything in history. Everyone has fallen, including the British Empire. They've all fallen because of debt. And here we are, unattainable debt during peacetime, supposedly. And 39 trillion, guys, you're going to 40 trillion before you blink an eye. It's not sustainable, and we will hit the wall, and we'll hit it hard when we do hit it. If we think 208 and 209 was a wake-up call, this one's going to hit you with the ball bat.
Totally.
Does that make you feel good?
Oh, it makes me feel great. Our generation has a lot to look forward to.
But wait a minute, am I right? Do you hear anybody? Has anybody heard anybody talk about debt? No one cares about it. No one cares about it. They just think it's all funny money. You know why? We had 0% interest for so long. That's why.
So I want to get your thoughts on an issue of real relevance to energy right now. Sure. AI and data centers dominating the energy conversation, huge energy demand associated with those projects. You've got people who want to ban them all or a moratorium. You've got people who think that we should have permissionless development. Just go ahead and build them all. So where are you on that spectrum? And are you optimistic about the potential data centers can have for driving reindustrialization or lowering prices, et cetera?
Well, let me talk about the hyperscalers, all the big boys that you know about in hyperscaling, the people that want all this, okay, the Metas of the world and the Amazons of the world. They all first came out and said, we want to be hooked to the grid. Well, the grid can't handle it. The grid doesn't have the capacity for what you want, okay? But at first they did. A lot of Virginia, Loudoun County here, close, they hooked to the grid. People are competing. Higher prices are going up. Fastest rising cost necessity in a household is energy. It's going up faster than about any other thing they're doing. Food prices are rising, of course, and gas now, I mean, it's up and down with the oil prices and all that. But this is something that hasn't dipped at all. It's the line on energy in your home is just unbelievable. So there's not a place that I know in America today that's been, come on, build it here, we want you. Okay, nobody. They're pushing back because in their mind, they're competing. They're direct competition with hyperscalers, these billionaires and all these billion companies, trading companies, that basically they can't compete. They don't think they're in the same league, but yet they're all fighting for the same amount of energy. So then we finally got a year ago, and I think President Trump even came out in one of his State of the Union, first one, about it'll be direct source. to where now they're going to be responsible. So anything I've been telling the people I know and the friends I have in that industry, I said, why don't y'all think of it this way? Most of it's being done with natural gas because it's plentiful and it's affordable and it's a transition. They all would like to get to SMRs eventually or get to, micros or whatever in the nuclear range. That's going to be a little while. They want to get in right now and they've got to, and we've got to win this AI race. So I've said this, if you have projected you need a 300 megawatt coal gasification plant, then I'm not coal gasification, combined cycle, natural gas combined cycle. You're going to build it, 300 megawatts. I said, why don't you build 20% capacity into that? Build 360 or 400 megawatts. Go into the community and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to build our own source with the best technology as far as emissions and environment, and that's going to be combined cycle. And we're going to also build capacity to where we're going to net meter back into the system to support the system at no greater than 5 cents a kilowatt hour. Put a cap at 5 cents a kilowatt hour. Then you're coming in, you're giving me reliability, you're giving me lowest prices, you're going to give me something that's going to support my way of life. I don't have to compete with you now. Now you're helping me. And you're going to do that. And on top of that, my backup power is going to be of clean technology. Now, I know there's a lot of battery storage just coming out, a lot of different things of this sort that's going to be happening that can give them storage. What people are upset about now, they got a combined cycle here and they have a diesel generator back here. And they're all upset about that, even though it might not run 2 months a year or 1 month a year, okay? They're still all bent up out of shape. So they're going to have to figure that one out, work it out. But if they can't come in and show me, I'm not competing with you. In fact, I'm going to give you reliability factor that you don't have now. And I think that would be more of a way for us to break into these markets. But the water, you're competing for water. So you better go where we have plentiful water. Now what I'm doing, I'm giving an advertisement for West Virginia because we've got it all. We've got oceans of water under us. We have oceans of gas under our feet. We have all of that. But I don't have one community that's not fighting them right now. Mm-hmm. Not one.
Yeah, I mean, so I was in Tucker County, West Virginia, not so long ago, and they've got those no power plant, no data center signs, right? And Pavan and I have been talking about this a lot. We've been wondering to what extent is the backlash to data centers representative of a broader backlash to building things more broadly, versus to what extent is this a backlash to this technology in particular? And I'm kind of curious what you see.
I don't think it's a technology at all. I just think basically it's just a straight, my backyard, my costs are high, and I don't see me benefiting from you coming here. That's about it in a nutshell. They don't see much benefit. They don't see long-term job opportunities. Tax bases, a lot of the states now are trying to keep, they see that's a new industry, so they're trying to keep a lot of this. In West Virginia, I think they made a big mistake because the governor and the legislature approved where the tax revenues come into the state first, and they were going to divide it a little bit up. That's not the way it works. Every county has a tax base. And if you're in that county, then you're going to basically be responsible for that. And you're going to pay a commercial to the state to a certain extent, but not the majority. And that's what they're fighting right now. But that one up there, all they had to do, and I've talked to both sides, and I said, why don't you all sit down? First of all, you have Mount Storm Power Plant, 1,600 megawatt coal-fired. That plant's going to be converted to natural gas plant, 1,600 megawatts. It's going to be big. And when they do that, why don't you tie into that power stream? Build the data center close to the power plant. It's an industrial site. Clear up that. I said, you guys just went, throw it out there, and they thought the people were going to embrace it, and they're not. And now you got a head of steam. So for them to correct that, they're going to have to sit down with the reasonable people that are opposing it because they thought it was going to be in an area of the state they didn't want, and it was going to be basically competing for the power. And they're not going to do either one of those if they change the site and tie into the existing plant.
So the hyperscalers got to build in almost heaven. That's what they got to do.
If they do it right.
So to close here, what's a thing that people are getting wrong or missing about energy policy? It could be 30,000 foot level, could be conceptual, could be super niche.
We don't do a good job of explaining history to people about basically energy. Every war has been fought over energy. Every developed nation, every superpower has had affordable, dependable, reliable energy. It's all around energy. If you don't have access to energy, you're in trouble. You're not going to live a good life. You're not going to have a quality of an economy that has any type of growth potential to it. When I first went to India, one of my first trips as a senator, and I went out into the Netherlands, if you will, out into the rural areas. All I saw was families, mostly women and children, picking up animal waste. And they were putting it and basically drying it in the sun to create energy at night to either heat their home or basically cook their food on. I'm thinking, if they're able to have energy, do you think they're going to care what's coming out of a smokestack or anything else of what they've had to do to get energy so far? So I've looked at all of that and I said, you know what? The difference is this. We have gone through all those iterations a century or more ago. We can help them benefit from all the growing pains we had. But you have a lot of these countries right now that are putting first generation coal plants. My gosh, we've moved on from that. And we should be sharing that around the world of what we can do now. You're not going to tell a person in a sovereign country, you can't use the energy I've laid in your backyard. You can't tell them that. You can show them how to use it better. That's what you can do. And if they know you're a good steward and good leader and you've done this and that, they'll pay attention to that. So when India is expanding their coal-fired plants, they should be doing it with scrubbers. They should be doing it with low NOx boilers. They should be doing it with baghouses. They should be using all the technology that we've gone through over the last 40 years to get to. I don't know if we're, and with that, if they'll do that, then we'll give them access in trading into our market. That's the caveat of the whole trade policies that we have, the greatest consuming market in the world. So we just have to be a little smarter in what we're doing and how we get people to do that. But if you don't have access to energy, we're not teaching it in schools. I can go into schools and talk to kids. I said, what do you think caused this war over here? The Japanese. I mean, we kind of cut off the oil. They were in trouble. It's just, you can look in history, it's everywhere. And if you don't know your history, you're sure to repeat it. And right now we get ourselves, and we were going in the bind, we would not have the energy under the Biden administration, under the Obama administration, and we would have not had the technology under the Trump administration. So you follow me? There's a balance to be had. Can you find that balance and move forward? We need the resources. We extract natural gas and oil from the Gulf cleaner than anywhere in the world. We're able to extract that and do a better job. We have the technology. We've gone through some tough ones, but we've gotten better. That's the beauty about the America. Our system improves, and that's the checks and balances in a democracy. And that's what we're looking for. So my friend Brian Schweitzer and I were governors together, and we went to a climate meeting one time. And I said, Brian, I'm not sure we should be here. He said, it'll be fun, Joe. So we're on a panel, and they're just beating the living crap out of us. Your country, your state uses coal, and you have this and that, and gas. And you guys, you don't care about the climate. I said, wait a minute, I don't want to breathe dirty air. I don't want to drink dirty water. I'm same as you. I said, we want clean, but I also want to work. That's part of my environment. If I'm not working, hell, I'm dead anyway. So can't we just work this out? And it just kept getting more ranker and ranker. And finally, Brian Schweitzer, if you have to know Brian, he looked at the guys and he looked at the audience, he says, listen, unless you're naked eating nuts living in a tree, by God, you use energy. Get over it, would you? And I said, Brian, time to go. Time to go, Brian. That's how we ended it.
I think that is the perfect way to end this panel. Senator Manchin, thank you so much.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.